Welcome to this episode of Intel Focus, the review series, where we dive into the world of OSINT, disinformation, and media literacy. Each episode reviews key reports and findings, including events around the world, offering in-depth analysis on topics like intelligence gathering, digital misinformation, investigative reports, and fact-checking. This podcast aims to promote ethical and responsible practices in intelligence and information sharing. In this episode, we talk how OSINT is used to monitor terror groups and how monitoring terror groups evolve as technology advances.
All right, so today we're diving into something I think you're really going to find interesting. It's open source intelligence, OSINT, for those in the know. And we're going to be looking at how it's being used in the fight against terrorism. And that's where things get really fascinating. You might be surprised by just how much information is really readily available online. From news articles and social media posts to satellite images, all of that public information is being used for intelligence purposes. And it plays a bigger role than you might think.
Yeah, it really is a fundamental shift in the intelligence landscape.
Yeah.
With the internet becoming a key battleground, not just for information warfare, but for actual terrorist activity. Groups are using it for everything, spreading propaganda, recruiting new members, even coordinating attacks.
Yeah, and here's a stat that might make you rethink your next Google search. OSINT can account for up to 95% of the intel used in counterterrorism. So that means analysts are piecing together this huge puzzle, and a lot of those pieces are coming from sources that you and I can access every day.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that OSINT often plays a supporting role. It helps to complete a larger puzzle alongside other intelligence gathering methods. It's not like you're going to see a tweet and suddenly foil a terrorist plot single-handedly. But that tweet might be a small but vital clue in a much larger investigation.
So it's not about everyday people replacing traditional intelligence agencies.
Not at all. It's more about recognizing that the intelligence world has changed. Now, anyone with an internet connection can potentially contribute valuable information, whether intentionally or not.
Right. Think about that embassy bombing plot that was foiled because a would-be terrorist bragged about it on Facebook. That's a real example of how open source intelligence can be such a powerful tool for good. But like any powerful tool, there's always that potential for misuse.
Absolutely. It's, a classic case of a tool being used for both good and evil. For example, terrorists have been known to use Google Maps to plan attacks, monitor social media to gauge public sentiment, and even spread disinformation to sow chaos.
And because this information is accessible to anyone with an internet connection, that means that terrorists can use it too.
Precisely. And that's why the work of OSINT analysts is so crucial. They have to sift through a mountain of data, filter out the noise, and identify those nuggets that actually matter. Imagine trying to find a needle in a haystack. But the haystack is the entire internet. It's a daunting task.
It really is. So how do they even begin to tackle that? I mean, the internet is a vast and ever-changing landscape.
Well, there are a number of tools and techniques that they use. Some of them are sophisticated software that analyzes language patterns, while others rely on good old-fashioned human intuition and expertise. But perhaps the biggest challenge isn't just the quantity of data. It's the potential for bias and manipulation.
Yeah, we've all seen how easily disinformation can spread online these days. So how do OSINT analysts avoid falling prey to fake news or propaganda?
They have to be incredibly vigilant. They cross-reference information from multiple sources, they look for inconsistencies, and they consider the motivations of those who are spreading the information. Think about the case of that fake Facebook profile. That was actually created to gather intelligence on terrorist groups. It was so convincing that it fooled even experienced analysts, highlighting how easy it can be to be misled by carefully crafted online personas.
Wow, that's concerning. It makes you realize how much of what we see online might not be what it seems. So how can we trust OSINT as a source of intelligence if it's so susceptible to manipulation?
Well, that's where the all-source aspect of intelligence gathering comes in. OSINT is most effective when it's combined with other forms of intelligence. Human sources, signals intelligence, even good old-fashioned detective work. By corroborating information from these different sources, analysts can build a much more accurate and reliable picture of what's really going on.
So it's about having those multiple sources to validate the information. Kind of like having multiple witnesses to an event. If their stories all line up, you can be more confident that you're getting the truth. But if they contradict each other, you need to investigate further.
Exactly. And in the world of counterterrorism, that further investigation can be the difference between preventing an attack and dealing with its aftermath.
That's a sobering thought. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but let's talk about the wins. You mentioned that embassy bombing plot that was foiled thanks to Facebook. Are there other examples of OSINT actually helping to thwart terrorism?
Oh, absolutely. There was a situation where analysts were monitoring jihadist chat rooms and social media. That's a common practice in counterterrorism, by the way.
So they're essentially acting as like digital detectives, following the trail of online breadcrumbs to uncover a real-world threat?
Precisely. In this instance, they noticed a pattern of chatter, suggesting a potential attack was being planned. By piecing together information from these online conversations along with other intelligence sources, they were able to identify the individuals involved and prevent the attack from taking place.
That's incredible, but sometimes the information is even more direct. There was a case where an attacker was actually tweeting during a terrorist siege. Pretty shocking, right?
It is a stark example of how OSINT can provide real-time intelligence. The tweets provided authorities with valuable insights into the attacker's mindset, their tactical approach. It was a mix of propaganda conts, even updates on what was happening inside the building.
It's almost like having a live feed from inside a terrorist operation.
It really is.
So you mentioned monitoring chat rooms and tracking social media. Are there other ways that OSINT is being applied in counterterrorism?
Another fascinating application of OSINT is in identifying and tracking foreign fighters. Imagine being able to follow the digital footprints of individuals who traveled to conflict zones like Syria to join terrorist organizations. Their social media posts, their online interactions, even their travel patterns can reveal a wealth of information about their activities and networks.
It's like a digital version of following someone's tracks in the sand, except these tracks are left all over the internet.
Exactly. And by analyzing those tracks, analysts can gain a better understanding of how terrorist groups recruit, train, and operate. It even helps in developing counter-messaging campaigns to combat the propaganda that these groups use to lure in new recruits. It's a proactive approach to fighting terrorism, using the same tools that terrorists use, but for good.
So it's not just about reacting to threats, but also about trying to prevent them from emerging in the first place. That's a really important distinction. But given the sheer volume of information out there, I can't help but wonder how effective OSINT can be in the long run. I mean, the internet is only getting bigger, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Which is why the future of OSINT is likely to be shaped by advancements in artificial intelligence and machine learning. These technologies are going to be essential in helping analysts process vast amounts of data, identify patterns, and separate the signal from the noise. It's like giving them a superpower to see through the digital clutter. For instance, there's natural language processing, which can be used to analyze text for sentiment and meaning. And then there's image recognition, which can be used to identify key infrastructure or individuals in satellite images.
So instead of having a team of analysts trying to read every tweet and social media posts, AI can do a lot of the heavy lifting and flag the most important information for human review. That sounds like a game changer.
It does have the potential to be.
It also makes me think about the Westgate attack you mentioned earlier, where the attacker was tweeting during the siege. That whole event seems like a perfect case study to really see how OSINT is used in a real-world crisis.
It is. The Westgate attack was a horrific terrorist incident that took place in Nairobi, Kenya back in September of 2013. A group of armed militants stormed this upscale shopping mall. They took hostages and engaged in a 4-day siege that left at least 67 people dead and many more injured.
Yeah, I remember that. It was a shocking event that really captured global attention, and it highlighted the growing threat of terrorism in East Africa.
It did. And it also demonstrated the power and the complexities of OSINT in a crisis situation. During the siege, both the attackers and the authorities were using social media to communicate with the outside world.
Wait, so you're telling me that the terrorists were tweeting during the attack?
Yes, one of the attackers was actively tweeting updates, propaganda, and even taunts throughout the siege. It was a chilling example of how terrorists are exploiting social media to amplify their message and sow fear.
So disturbing and fascinating from an OSINT perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine the intelligence value of those tweets. Did they provide any actionable insights for the authorities?
They did it to some extent. The tweets gave authorities real-time information about the attacker's location, their movements, and even their mindset.
Wow, it's like having a live feed from inside a terrorist operation, albeit a very disturbing one. What about the authorities? Were they using social media as well?
They were. But in a different way, Kenyan authorities were using social media to try to manage the flow of information, reassure the public, and counter the terrorists' propaganda.
So it was like a digital battleground with both sides vying for control of the narrative. That also raises questions about the accuracy and reliability of information during a crisis. I mean, how can you tell what's real and what's fake when everyone is trying to push their own agenda?
That's a key challenge in OSINT, especially during a rapidly evolving crisis. There's a lot of noise, disinformation, and conflicting reports.
Hmm.
It takes skill and experience to filter through all that and identify the information that's actually reliable and actionable.
So OSINT analysts are like digital detectives piecing together a puzzle from fragments of information scattered across the internet.
That's a great analogy. And in the case of the Westgate attack, OSINT played a crucial role in understanding what happened, who was responsible, and how the attack was carried out.
The attack itself was just the beginning, right? I mean, the investigation and the aftermath probably relied heavily on OSINT as well.
Absolutely. After the siege ended, investigators turned to social media, CCTV footage, and other publicly available sources to identify the attackers, track their movements, and piece together their network.
Like following a digital trail of breadcrumbs, trying to understand how this horrific event came to be, and I'm guessing social media played a big role in that.
It did. Investigators were able to use social media posts, chat logs, and other online communications to track the attackers' radicalization process, their connections to terrorist groups, and their planning for the attack.
Right. It's a reminder that the internet is a powerful tool for both good and evil. You know, it can be used to connect people, share ideas, and build communities. But it can also be used to spread hate, incite violence, and plan attacks.
That duality is at the heart of the OSINT challenge. How do we harness the power of the internet for good while mitigating its potential for harm? It's a question that we'll continue to grapple with as technology advances and the online world evolves.
Yeah, and in the case of the Westgate attack, it seems like OSINT played a crucial role in bringing the perpetrators to justice, or at least holding them accountable for their actions.
It did.
Yeah.
And it highlights the potential of OSINT to support not just counterterrorism efforts, but also criminal investigations, intelligence gathering, and even humanitarian aid.
I'm really starting to see the bigger picture here. OSINT isn't just this niche field for spies and intelligence analysts. It's a powerful tool that can be used by a wide range of actors, from governments and businesses to journalists and human rights groups.
Exactly. And its impact is only going to grow as the world becomes increasingly interconnected and reliant on digital information.
Yeah, before we get too carried away with the possibilities of OSINT, I think it's important to acknowledge the challenges and limitations we've discussed. The issue of data reliability, the potential for bias and manipulation, the need for ethical guidelines, and the importance of human expertise are all crucial factors to consider.
I completely agree. OSINT is a powerful tool, but it's not a magic bullet. It needs to be used responsibly, ethically, and in conjunction with other forms of intelligence gathering.
So it's not about replacing traditional intelligence methods, but rather complementing and enhancing them with the power of open source information.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And as we've seen in the case of the Westgate attack, OSINT can play a crucial role in understanding complex events, identifying threats, and holding perpetrators accountable.
It's a fascinating and rapidly evolving field, one that's sure to continue shaking the world we live in, and I, for one, am eager to see how it develops in the years to come.
I share your enthusiasm. And as we continue to explore the world of OSINT, I think it's important to keep in mind its broader implications for society. How will OSINT shape the future of intelligence warfare and even our everyday lives?
Those are some big questions, and I'm sure we'll be revisiting them in future deep dives. But for now, I think it's time to take a step back and consider what all of this means for you, our listener.
That's a great idea. Let's bring it back to the personal level and explore how OSINT can empower individuals to make more informed decisions and navigate the complexities of the modern world.
Sounds good to me. But before we do, I think it's time for a quick recap of what we've covered so far in this deep dive into OSINT and terrorism.
I agree. Let's take a moment to synthesize the key takeaways and lay the groundwork for our final segment, where we'll delve into the personal implications of OSINT and empower you to become a more informed and discerning consumer of information.
All right, so before we wrap things up, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned about open source intelligence.
Yeah, we started by defining OSINT, which is essentially using publicly available information to gain insights. And as we've seen, it's being used by governments to combat terrorism, by businesses for a competitive advantage, and even by journalists and activists to hold the powerful accountable.
Right, and we talked about some of the challenges of OSINT, like the sheer volume of data out there, the need to verify information, and the potential for bias and manipulation.
We also explored the Westgate Mall attack as a case study to really see OSINT in action during a real-world crisis, and how both the terrorists and the authorities use social media to communicate their messages. We see how investigators used OSINT to piece together what happened and bring the perpetrators to justice.
Now let's bring all of this back to you, our listener. You're probably thinking, okay, this OSINT stuff is fascinating, but what's it mean for me? Well, even if you're not a spy or a journalist, OSINT can actually be a really powerful tool in your everyday life. Remember, knowledge is power.
Think about it this way. Before accepting a job offer, you could use OSINT to go beyond the company's website and really dig deeper. Look at employee reviews, search for news articles about the company, and even check out the LinkedIn profiles of the people you'd be working with.
It's like doing your own background check to make sure the opportunity is a good fit.
Exactly. Or, let's say you're thinking about investing in a company. You can use OSINT to assess their financial health, their reputation, and even their potential for growth. Read industry reports, analyze their social media presence, and see what their competitors are up to.
You're basically becoming your own investigative journalist, gathering information to make smarter decisions.
Right. And this applies to so many other areas of life.
Like planning a trip. Instead of just relying on travel websites, you could use OSINT to find hidden gems that are recommended by locals on blogs or forums. Check out recent social media posts to see what's happening in real time. Maybe discover a cool event or a newly opened restaurant.
It's like having a personal network of local guides at your fingertips, all thanks to the power of open source information.
And it's not just about fun stuff like travel. Imagine you're moving to a new neighborhood. OSINT can help you learn about crime rates, school districts, and even the local community vibe. You can check out local news sites, neighborhood forums, or even crime mapping tools.
It's like doing your own due diligence on your future home. Make sure you feel comfortable and secure in your new surroundings.
These are just a few examples, but the possibilities are truly endless. The key is to start thinking about how OSINT can be applied to your life, to your decisions, to your pursuit of knowledge.
Absolutely. OSINT can be a powerful tool for personal empowerment. It can help you navigate the complexities of modern life and take control of your own destiny.
So it's not just about learning what OSINT is, but how to use it effectively. What are some tips for our listener to become a more savvy OSINT user?
Well, the most important thing is always question your sources. Just because something is online doesn't mean it's true. Look for corroboration from multiple sources, consider the source's potential biases, and be wary of information that seems too good to be true.
It's like being a detective. You're looking for clues, but you need to verify their authenticity before you build your case.
You also want to use a variety of tools. Don't limit yourself to Google searches. Explore specialized search engines, social media monitoring tools, image analysis websites, and even mapping platforms.
Think of it as having a toolkit full of specialized instruments, each one designed for a specific purpose. The more tools you know how to use, the more effective you'll be.
And lastly, remember that OSINT is a skill. It takes time and practice to develop. Start small, experiment with different tools and techniques, and gradually expand your knowledge.
Like learning a new language, you start with the basics and gradually build your fluency over time, but the rewards are definitely worth the effort.
I couldn't agree more. OSINT can empower you to be a more informed citizen, a savvier consumer, and a more confident decision maker.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into OSINT and terrorism. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the world of open source intelligence. It's a fascinating and constantly evolving field, and as we become more aware of the vast amount of information that's available to us and how to use it, we really have a responsibility to do so ethically and thoughtfully.
Well said. OSINT is a powerful tool that can be used for good or for ill. It's up to each of us to make sure that we're using it wisely.
So stay curious, stay skeptical, and most importantly, stay informed to win.